Anyway, so here we go. The Sun's Babies by Edith Howes. And it starts with a poem. The Sun Man's babies. The Moon Man sent his stars to bed and turned a pitying eye to where the Sun Man sailed alone across the eastern sky. And I'm just going to write down, if I can spot it somewhere, what the time is. Do I have something somewhere that... Oop, I nearly tipped over my microphone and that would have been quite loud, sorry. Something somewhere is meant to tell me 54 minutes. There it is, 54. So I know where to look when I'm going to split it into two parts for putting it on YouTube. So one book is in one playlist and the other book is in the other playlist. There you go. The Moon Man sent his stars to bed and turned a pitying eye to where the Sun Man sailed alone across the eastern sky. Poor thing, he said, how sad to have no children round your knee. 1,000,000 stars are mine. How lonely you must be. The Sun Man laughed a jolly laugh. He pointed far below to where the shining, busy earth swung golden in his glow. 1,000,000 babes are mine, he said, on yonder earth. My sunbeams wrap them all the day. To me they owe their birth. 1,000,000 babes smile up from dawn till day is done. And when I say my last good night, I kiss them every one. That's the entry poem. Now, the Sun's Babies. The Snowdrop Baby. The Snowdrop Baby lay in her little cradle under the ground. Do you know how white and smooth the snowdrop cradle is, and how snugly the silky sheets are tucked around the baby? Above the ground it was summer. The birds sang, the bees hummed, the roses and pinks talked to one another across the beds. What a number of flowers are out this year, they said. The garden is full of blossom. Do you know that the flowers talk? That's a question to you. The Snowdrop Baby listened to it all. I'm not needed yet, she said. She turned over and went to sleep. Summer passed, and autumn came. Asters and dahlias talked to one another now, and tiger lilies bloomed in the garden. The Snowdrop Baby woke and listened. My time is not yet come, she said. She slept again. Winter came. Frost followed frost, killing all the flowers. Storm after storm blew the dead leaves away, leaving the brown stalks bare. Snow fell and melted. A tiny drop crept down to where the Snowdrop Baby lay. Do you know how the water drops creep down? That your time has come, it said. Yes, said the baby joyfully. I am making my white frock. Soon I shall go up. Next day she was ready. She pushed her way through the soft, wet earth and reached the top, up yet and up, till she hung on her green stalk, high above the ground. How beautiful she looked in her snowy frock. Pure white it was, except for here and there a splash of softest green. Do you know how lovely snowdrop babies are? She turned her face to the ground, for the sun dazzled her and made her shy, but a bird saw her. A snowdrop, it sang. Spring is coming, sweet spring is coming. Do you know how sweet spring is? And that's the end of that chapter. So there you go. We've got a description of a flower, a plant that is hibernating under the ground in the bulb, and then at the right season coming up and producing the flower that hangs from the stem above the ground. But it's described as if it's a person, a being. And I think that's probably how the rest of the story goes. Little golden heart, a field... And I didn't have a drink of water, sorry. I normally remember and have a drink in the chapter breaks, and I forgot to tell you that at the beginning. You need to go and get one now. Keep yourself hydrated, get yourself a snack, and make sure you're sitting somewhere comfortable. How could you have let me read without reminding you? Ah, well, next time you'll know. Remind me. Jenny, don't forget. Water, snacks, seat. Go to it, Jev. Get it. Anyway, right. Little golden heart. A field daisy opened her golden heart. and looked up at the blue sky. The warm sun shone on her, and the morning wind blew softly over her. But the daisy was afraid. "The world is so wide, and I am so small," she sighed. "I cannot be of any use. Perhaps it would be better to fold my petals and hide my head." A bee flew down and settled on the daisy. "Dear little golden heart, how sweet you are," she whispered. How your white petals shine. Their tips are pink, as if the wind had kissed them. Will you give me honey and pollen to make bee bread for the babies in the hive?" Did you know that the little lawn daisies that have tiny little flowers about as big as my thumbnail, that the back of the petals have a little bit of pink on the tips? Have you noticed that? Go and have a look next time you see some daisies in the grass. "Will you give me honey and pollen to make bee bread for the babies in the hive?" That's the bee larvae. The daisy shook with joy. "Take all I have," she said. "How glad I am to find that I am loved and needed." A lark dropped from the sky, singing a glorious song that told of the beauty of the clouds. He saw the daisy. "Dear little golden heart, how sweet you are," he sang as he came down. "How your white petals shine. Their tips are pink as if the wind had kissed them. Will you stay there and bloom so that my babies peeking out from their nest may watch you all day? They love to look at pretty shining things." "Gladly, gladly," cried the daisy. "How sweet it is to think that they should like to look at me." A lark, skylark. It's a wonderful summery sound. Actually, I haven't heard any this year so far. Maybe we're too early. It's one of the sounds that I really, really enjoy. There's a particular native New Zealand bird that I really enjoy, which I missed when we lived in England, but skylarks we have in this part of New Zealand as well as when we're in England. And they go right up high in the sky, and they sing as they're flying, and then they drop down a bit, and then they rise up again. So that dropping down to sing to her was good. It drew pictures in my head. Skylarks, lovely. A little girl came tripping over the short grass. That just means running gently, kind of tripping, not falling over type tripping. When she saw the daisy, she ran to it and knelt beside it. She touched it lovingly. "Dear little golden heart, how sweet you are," she said. "How your white petals shine. Their tips are pink as if the wind had kissed them. Will you stay here and bloom till I may bring the baby out to see you?" "Oh, how willingly," whispered the daisy. Now her golden heart was full of joy. "What a happy, happy world," she thought. "Although it is so wide, there is a place for me. I can be useful and give pleasure. What could be better than that?" Thankfully, she spread her shining petals to the sun. When night came, she folded their tips together and hung her head to rest till morning. Light again brought happiness. Have you noticed that? Daisies close at night. This book doesn't have chapter numbers. It has headings, but it's not marking them as if they're chapters. So I'm not reading out chapter numbers. I'm just reading until we get to the next section. And I will put the headings of each section in the recordings, so you know which ones are which. Dickie Codlin. The spring winds rocked Dickie Codlin to and fro as he lay in his scented cradle, and the happy bees buzzed their honey song over him, for he lay wrapped in his tiny egg skin in the heart of an apple blossom. Mrs. Moth had gently laid him there only a day or two before. The pink apple petals loosened their hold and dropped to the ground, and the flower closed up and grew into an apple, and Dickie Codlin hatched himself out of his egg skin and grew into a little caterpillar with a pink and white skin and ever so many fat, short legs. He still lived on in the heart of the apple. It was a delightful place to have for a home, for the walls were made of the food he liked best, and all he had to do was turn himself round and nibble. So he stayed there eating and growing till he could not grow any bigger. Then he ate his way out to the skin. He stood in the entrance of the opening he had made and looked down. "Dear me," he said, "it seems a long way to the ground, but I must reach it somehow." He sat down on the apple and spun a silk thread, fixed it to the hole through which he had come, and dropped by it. "Goodbye, apple home," he called as he went, but the apple said nothing, for its heart was eaten out. When he reached the ground, he hurried to the trunk of the tree, crawled up it till he found a loose scrap of bark, and crept under this safe hiding place. "Now I am going to make my new clothes for my wedding," he said, so he spun a little silk workroom for himself. Into this he crept, and here he made his new clothes for his wedding. He made a brown velvet suit and beautiful bronze-tipped wings trimmed with gold dust. By and by he came out, looking wonderfully neat and handsome. Off he flew into the warm, scented air to be married to pretty Miss Codlin. It was a splendid wedding. Everybody wore new clothes and danced in the maze dance, and after that they had a honey feast. What have we just heard? We've heard about a codlin caterpillar eating its way in an apple. Have you ever eaten apples that have had codlin in them? And you find the little wee trail of where the caterpillar was inside it and leaving its passageway out to the outside edge, and then it goes down and it pupates and goes into its version of a chrysalis like you have with monarch butterflies and becomes a codlin moth. And so that's the description of the wings at the end. The apple fairy. She was usually a busy little fairy, but one year she grew lazy. "I'm going to take a rest," she said. "I don't see why I should work so hard. I shall sleep all the winter and play all the summer, and the apple tree can take care of itself." Oh dear. She curled herself up on her snug little bed down amongst the roots of the apple tree, and there she slept through the winter, creeping out only now and again to peep and shiver at the cold, wet world outside. No work was done in the workroom where in other winters she had been so busy, and so when the spring came and all the other apple trees were wreathed in sweet pink flowers, hers alone stood bare and brown. The bees came round the tree, buzzing their surprise and disappointment. "Wake up, apple fairy," they called. "The spring has come and your tree is bare. Where are our honey cups and pollen bags?" The moths and early butterflies came fluttering round the bees, for they too were anxious about the honey cups, but the apple tree fairy gave them no satisfaction. "Go away," she called from her bed. "I don't care about your old honey cups. I am going to rest." So they had to fly away to other trees. The birds came next. "Why, apple fairy, where are your flowers?" they chirped. "At this rate there will be no apples, and there will be a sad lot. That will be a sad loss for us, for yours were the sweetest in the garden." "Go away," called the apple fairy. "I don't care about your old apples. I'm going to rest." "How very strange," said the birds to one another. "This is not like our little apple fairy of other springs." They flew away to the flowered trees to sing. They flew away to the flowered trees to sing. The sun shone brightly, the air was clear and warm, and the apple fairies came up from their workrooms for their spring dance on the young clover leaves. "But where is our little sister?" they asked. They ran to her tree only to find it bare and empty. "Where are you, little sister?" they called. She came up and stood on a branch to look at them. "What is the matter?" they asked. "Why has your tree no flowers, while ours are pink? Where are your petals? Perhaps you have not yet had time to unroll them all. Shall we help you?" "No, thank you," she said. "I'm having a rest. There will be no apples this year for my tree, for I have slept all the winter and am going to play all the summer." The fairies looked shocked. "You mustn't do that," they cried. "Why, if we all did that, there would be no apples at all." "I don't care about the old apples," she said sulkily, and down she went again. She came up a few minutes later to peep at the happy fairies dancing on the clover, while the birds sang their gayest songs and the crickets played their little banjos, but she did not join them, for she had felt that they did not approve of her laziness. "Ah, well, my leaves will soon be out, for I put the buds on last summer," she said to herself. "When they come I shall make a swing and swing all through the long, sunny days." Soon the leaves opened out. She made the swing, hung it on a branch, and sat in it in the pleasant shade, while the other fairies polished up the growing apples and formed the buds for the next year's leaves. She was not really happy, but she tried to think she was. She was rather lonely, and somehow it was dull when there was nothing to do, but she did not go down to her work. She swung herself to and fro, till the autumn came and the apples on the other trees were ripe. One day a merry, childish voice floated through the garden. "Oh, Grandpa, it's my birthday, so I have come for an apple off your best tree." Then at last the apple tree fairy hung her head and was sorry, for her punishment had come. Every year on her birthday, pretty little Elise had been given the best apple in the garden, and every year until now the apple fairy had been proud to know that it had been picked from her tree. Now, alas, she had no apples. Elise would be disappointed, and she was very fond of Elise. Elise was indeed disappointed. She listened to her grandfather as he told her how his best apple tree had failed this year, and how he thought he must cut it down if it did not do better next year. Then Elise came and stood under the tree and looked up anxiously into the branches. "I am so sorry," she said aloud. "I wonder if it will have apples on next year. I do hope it will." "It shall. Indeed it shall," cried the apple fairy. She sprang to the end of a branch so that Elise could see her. "I have been lazy," she said. "I have slept all the winter and have played all the summer, but now I shall work. You shall have apples next year. Goodbye, little Elise. Here is my swing." She took down her swing, put it into Elise's hands, and went to her workroom. Elise was so astonished at the sight of a real fairy and a real fairy swing that she could find nothing to say. But when she came again the next year, the apples on her favourite tree were again the finest in the garden, and the apple fairy was again busy and happy. There you go. We all have a role to play. I think that's the moral of that story. Johnny Crocus. Wake up, little Johnny Crocus. Sit on my knee and begin to grow." Johnny woke up, sat on his mother's knee, and began to grow. His mother fed him on rich white food, wrapped him warmly in soft blankets, so he grew big and strong. They lived together under the ground in a little round house with brown walls. This is the crocus bulbs under the ground. They divide, so that's little Johnny right next to the main bulb, and they have a brown wrapper around the outside. One day Johnny said, "Now I should like to go up and see what the world is like. May I go up today?" "Not yet," said his mother. "You must make your flower first." So Johnny set to work to make his flower. In the middle he set the pistil with its fans. Round the pistil he put the orange-coloured stamens with their long narrow sacs on their heads, ready to be filled with pollen. Outside the stamens he made a row of petals, small and closely folded now, but soon to grow big and wide. Then he wrapped a fine white silk cloak round the whole flower to keep it from harm. "My flower is made," he said to his mother. "May I go up now to see what the world is like?" "Not yet," said the mother. "Make your leaves first." So he made his leaves and set them closely round the flower. They were long and thin and pale yellow, for they would not turn green till they reached the sunlight. "My leaves are made," he said to his mother. "May I go up now to see what the world is like?" "Not yet," said his mother. "Make your pollen first." So he made his pollen and filled the long sacs with it. Then his flower was quite ready. He wrapped one white silk cloak after another over the flower and leaves together, till they were so snugly covered that no greedy insect could reach them. Sorry, my coffee. "My pollen is made," he said to his mother. "May I go up now to see what the world is like?" "Yes," said his mother. Johnny jumped for joy. He pushed and pushed through the brown earth above him, and at last out popped his little head into the light. The winter had not yet gone. Snow still lay in shaded places, but the sun was shining, and he shone now, full on Johnny Crocus. The silken cloaks fell away, the leaves sprang out and turned green, and slowly the flower opened its beautiful golden heart to the warmth of the sunshine. "Why, there is Johnny Crocus," called the sun. He shone more brightly than ever on the gleaming petals. "If Johnny is up, we must be stirring too," said the other crocuses. They sprang up and nodded and laughed to Johnny across the ground. Then the snowdrops peeped out, and soon the whole garden woke up and the spring came. I'm not sure where you live. Where I live in New Zealand, we don't have such extreme seasonal changes. Just a moment. The change between winter and spring is not quite so great. We have this part of New Zealand. It gets a bit cold enough to get a frost occasionally. It gets more rain than what it does in summer usually. The wind blows a bit harder than it usually does in summer, but it's more a relative change in temperature, not quite like the difference between summer and winter in England. When we were living in England, not every year, but we did get snow a few times, but it's definitely colder and frosty in winter. And the crocuses are the first flowers to come up. There are white ones, like in the story here. There are also purple ones, and I think there are yellow ones. And the pollen heads that they talked about in this story used to get picked and dried and used in cooking, and that's what we call saffron. Those pollen heads from crocus flowers, not other ones, crocus flowers, are used to make saffron. So when you have threads of saffron, those are dried ones of the pollen heads that are in the flowers, and they have to be picked carefully so you don't lose the pollen off them, because that's part of what makes the flavour and the colouring effect that they have when you're cooking things. And there are parts of England that used to actually, that was their main business, is that they used to grow crocuses for making saffron to be able to be sold. So places such as Saffron Walden, I think it is the name of one of the places in England. And that whole area, they used to grow crocuses for saffron. So there you go. That's one of those odd little things. Walden, I think it is. Saffron Walden. I don't know. Look it up. You'll find out about it. Look up saffron. What is saffron? And you'll find out all about it. And it used to be, and probably still is, but not as so much relatively, it used to be very expensive as a spice. It's not strongly flavoured, very, very subtle, but it does actually make a difference. We're going to read at least one more. I don't know how long it will be because my book doesn't tell me how long each of these sections are, unfortunately. The Daffodil Baby. It was winter time, and the Daffodil Baby lay wrapped in her warm brown blankets under the ground. But she was not a contented baby. She wanted to be up above the ground to see what the great world was like. "It is very dull down here," she said to her little friend, the earthworm. "Do please go up and see if it's time for me to rise." The earthworm wriggled his way to the top of the ground, but he soon came back, shivering with cold. "Don't think of going up yet," he said. "Lie down and sleep again in your warm blankets. On the earth there is nothing to be seen but snow and ice. You would be frozen if you went up now." So the Daffodil Baby lay down and went to sleep, and slept for many days and nights. By and by, however, she woke up and grew restless again. "Please see if I may go up," she said. The kind earthworm went up again, but came back as quickly as before. "Stay where you are," he cried. "It has rained so much that all the garden is flooded. You would be drowned if you went up now." The Daffodil Baby had to lie down again. She tried to sleep, but only grew more restless day by day. At last she begged the little earthworm to go up once more and see what the world was like. This time he came back smiling. "You may safely go up now," he said. "The snow and floods are all away, and the sunbeams are there. They are looking for you." The Daffodil Baby jumped for joy. She sprang out of her blankets and began to push her way up as fast as she could, wrapping herself as she went in a warm, thick cloak of green. When she reached the top, she felt the little sunbeams lay their warm hands on her, and she heard her tall leaf brothers say to one another, "Here comes Baby." But she did not look out from her cloak, for she said to herself, "I must make my frock and grow bigger before I shall be ready to play with the sunbeams." She worked away busily under her green cloak and grew taller and taller every day. The little earthworm often came out to look at her, but all he could see was the green cloak. "Why don't you come out and see the world?" he would shout from his lowly place on the ground. She always answered, "Wait a little longer. I am making my frock." At last, one beautiful spring morning, the frock was finished. "I'm coming out now," cried the Daffodil Baby. The earthworm wriggled up to the top, and the sunbeams flew down to help. They tugged at the thick green cloak with their warm hands till it flew open. Out sprang the Daffodil Baby, a Daffodil Baby no longer, but grown into the loveliest little daffodil lady. Her frock was all yellow and frilled, and she wore the daintiest little green shoes. She was very beautiful. The earthworm heard everybody say that. "What a glorious world!" cried the little yellow lady. "Now I am going to be very happy." And so she was. She played with the sunbeams, danced with the winds, and talked merrily to her green leaf brothers. The bees and the moths came to see her every day. One warm day, the first butterfly of the season came to visit her. But with all her good times, she did not grow proud. She was just as friendly with the earthworm now when she stood so far above him as she had been when under the ground. She often had long talks with him in the early mornings before the bees were awake. "Why don't you climb up here?" she asked him one day. "It is much nicer swaying in the wind, and I could talk to you so much more easily." "I should grow giddy up there," answered the earthworm. "It is not the place for me at all. Besides, I shall be able to talk to you all through the long winter when you are in your blankets again." Now, daffodils. That's the end of that chapter, by the way, that section, by the way. Daffodils. I have some, what we refer to as spring bulbs. I have some daffodil bulbs planted in my garden across the driveway that I see from my kitchen window. And I also have what I've always called jonquils. Something in that family. I've always called them jonquils, but my ones have white flowers with a little yellow centre or a white centre. Paper whites, the various narcissus are what they're referred to as. And so they're related to daffodils. They have a long stem, and then they have a cluster of little flowers that they put out and hang together. We think of them as being spring flowers, and when we were in England, they were spring flowers. I don't know what it is about where I live, but they always, my jonquils, my paper whites, my narcissus, always flower in autumn. Right when there's no other nice flowers around, right when the weather's starting to get horrible. And it's wonderful because I look out my window and here I have these lavish spreads of these creamy white and yellow flowers across the driveway, just saying, "Oh, isn't it wonderful?" But the daffodils, they come up in spring, or very, very early spring here in this part of New Zealand. But all of them, they do this, they come up the way this was described, where you've got the ground level here and the flower bud comes up. And it's a little bit thicker than the rest of the stem, and it keeps coming up and up and up and up. And you've just got the bud, and it's got this wrapper around it, this outer layer around it. And as it gets taller and taller and taller, that outer layer gets more and more dry, and then it splits open, and then the flower opens out once it's up a lot taller. It's quite funny actually seeing it and recognizing how accurate this description is, even though it's talking about it like it's a person, a character. So I'm going to finish with this poem, okay? Daffodils, oh, the golden daffodils that open in the spring, when gorse blooms out on all the hills and birds begin to sing. They nod their heads, their yellow heads, all down the garden walk, as if they wish to leave their beds and run about and talk. Suppose they could, what jolly fun to see them run and play, like golden children from the sun, come down to spend the day. And there you go. That's the end of this section. And we shall have more next time. So there you go. That's different, isn't it? A series of stories about plants and insects and other crawling and creeping creatures like codlin, caterpillars and moths. How different. written by a New Zealand author who decided that children deserved to learn about what things are like. She used imaginative language, but she still was describing what it's like in real life. So the bulb is under the ground. The inner part of the bulb is a creamy white colour for most of those, and it will often have a brown papery outside layer that's protecting it. And it stays down there and it forms part of the plant down there under the ground during winter, and then it grows up and it opens out and things like that. And like when she was talking about the crocus flowers, the different parts of the flower, she used proper words for them, pistils and stamens and pollen and things like that. And that was her decision was, I think little children should be able to learn about these things, but using story styles that they will understand and relate to, but describing things that actually are real, that are the way they actually happen. So there you go. That's an odd one. You can look her up if you want. Edith Howes, Howes. And I'll see you next time. Before I go, if you are watching this on Twitch and you follow me, Twitch will notify you next time I go live. Well, it will notify you each time I go live, and that way you won't miss out. And if you are watching this on YouTube, if you click the subscribe button, it will show you in the panel alongside on YouTube when I'm live. But also, if you click the bell icon that's next to the subscribe button, it will actually tell you that I am live. Instead of just having it sitting there, it will actually tell you when I'm live. That's just one way so you don't miss out. Not live, when I put a new video up. And that's just one way of not missing out if you don't want to miss out. And don't forget, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can actually listen to some other stories that we've already done. And we'll see you next time. Don't forget to have fun with words. Bye.